money isn't so much about lack, but it's more about separation. When we think about things like shadow work, right, which is the identification that something is off, that there are aspects of you that you're not paying attention to, that you haven't paid attention to, and that you need to really put some intention towards in order to recognize yourself as a complete and whole being, you begin to start to heal and bring and piece together the aspects of who you are to essentially really gain more clarity and insight along the trajectory of your life, right? To gain more control, to gain more insight and power. And so, what I want to do today is I want to share with you how to look at shadow work as it pertains to money, as it pertains to seeing your true self. Okay. Now, with shadow work, you see here, I've drawn a nice little demonstration as to what really shadow work is about. And that shadow work is a product essentially of the ego. Now, you may ask, why is that? I'm going to get into that. But when we think about shadow work, what I want you to understand is that there are many aspects of who you are, right? There is your consciousness, right? Which is the pure essence of who you are. There is your conscious mind, right? This is the part of your mind that we use about 5 to 10% of. Okay, this is the part of your mind that is analyzing, critiquing, the part of you that's talking, witnessing, and looking at different things. There is the popular, infamous subconscious mind. That is the part of you that is in control of habits, right? Programs. That's the part of you that is roughly about, let's say, 95% of everything you experience goes into your subconscious mind. But especially when we think about the subconscious mind, we're thinking about it as it pertains to your habits, your triggers, the things that you are, you believe, your belief systems, things of that nature. Okay. And then we have the unconscious. Okay. These are the things that we just are so low in the hierarchy, but it's so deep down in your mind that you really don't know how to address them. The subconscious mind, we can address them, right? We can address them by just paying attention to certain patterns and things that happen in your life. But the unconscious, you can also look at it from a, level of analyzing it, right? You can see patterns, and then you want to get into where those patterns come from. So anyway, when we think about shadow work, we are addressing these unconscious programs, these unconscious beliefs, right? That are so deep, they are deeper than the subconscious. The subconscious beliefs and aspects of you are easily programmable, right? And when I say easily, I'm talking about it relative to the unconscious mind. So the unconscious mind really deals in more like, trauma. Okay. It deals in more like untapped or things going on in your mind that are a result of maybe something negative that happens or a negative belief system, paradigm, program, things of that nature. But they're really hidden. And so when we do shadow work, what we're doing is we are addressing that aspect of you. So this part here can be looked at as, right, the unconscious. Okay. This part here is the part that we're focused on healing. Okay. Because the assumption is there's something wrong there. There's something wrong with how you were raised, how you see life, how you feel about life, so forth and so on. So Essentially, when we're talking about shadow work, we're coming from a standpoint of viewing oneself, right, from the ego. Okay. Now, here's the trick. Now, people aren't really aware of this when we do shadow work, but I'm going to explain to you why this is the case and why this is so. The ego is basically the part of you that creates separation. Okay. And this is illusion. This is an illusion. This isn't based on true spiritual, you know, fundamentals, right? This isn't the actual truth of who you are. We learn that in spirituality, there are levels of truth. And when we get down to the ultimate truth, right, there is no separation between you and I, right? Between you and the universe, between you and your partner, you and your dog or your cat, right? You and the stranger that you cross paths with today. But because we're on this spiritual journey of reawakening, the ego is necessary because it's a pivotal part of the game of reawakening or coming into remembrance of who you are. So, but shadow work deals in trying to heal oneself through the lens of the ego. Why? Because it is looking at you as separate, looking at different aspects of you as separate. Okay. It is seeing that there is an aspect of you here that isn't healed, right? There is an aspect of you here that is conscious, right? Has a subconscious, right? So here would encompass more of your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. Okay. And then, of course, there is this aspect here, which represents consciousness, the purity of who you are. So everything is separated. Now, here's the thing though, and this will come back toward with as we talk about money in a little bit. So be patient with me. When we recognize that this projection, okay, is coming from consciousness, when we look at real life, right, and how shadows work, essentially, there is a light source, okay, the sun. Or you can even look at the light source in a room, but let's use the sun because it's more of a natural light source and it represents life in itself. There is the sun. The sun is shining and it is sending out rays of light. Then there is you, okay? You stand there, you feel the rays of the light, and then there is this holographic projection of you on the floor or on the wall, okay? That represents your shadow. So when we think about shadow work, what we are trying to do is get rid of the shadow, okay? We are trying to really integrate the shadow into our lives. We're trying to heal the shadow. Now, this is where I'm getting at. The best way to heal the shadow, one way is through shadow work, which addresses the shadow directly, okay? And there is a point to that. There is nothing wrong with addressing the shadow because you're looking at it as there's something wrong here. There's a disconnection here. Let me look at it so I can address it. That's why it's there. That is true. It is there for you to pay attention to it. Okay. Pay attention to the areas of your life where you're not whole and complete or you don't feel whole and complete. The trauma, right? The bad memories, things of that nature. The negative belief systems, paradigms, what have you, to look at those so that way you can essentially bring yourself back, right, to the source of who you truly are. Okay. So shadow work is productive. Okay. It could get you results. But what I'm going to share with you is how to think differently to get those results quicker. Now, as it pertains to money, when we are dealing with shadow work and we're dealing with addressing our issues with money, basically the shadow looks like limiting beliefs like, I'm broke. Okay. Or, I can't create money or I'm not smart enough. right? So there's all these limiting beliefs that show up in your life, right? That you pay attention to more than your actual self. That's also what the shadow represents. You're paying attention to a projection, not the reality of who you are. Okay. So now the best thing to do, okay, is instead of looking at oneself from the viewpoint of the ego, which is what shadow work kind of does because it is separate, we're looking at you as separate aspects, looking at separate aspects of yourself, looking at things as separate beings or entities. So this is what I actually suggest, right? Is that instead of looking at oneself from the ego, we need to look at oneself as consciousness. Okay. Remember, the ego separates. Even though that separation isn't real, it isn't true, it is still something that you can identify with. And we often do. This is why we have a shadow in the first place. So instead of identifying with ego, ego says, I am separate, I am me, I am you, I am that, this is that, right? I am here, I am living in the universe versus being one with the universe. So instead of looking at things from this perspective of the ego, when you look at things from the perspective of consciousness, instead of seeing this light source as something that is separate from you, which will automatically, right, project a shadow, right? When you recognize that this separation of aspects of who you are is an illusion, that in actuality, you are not separate from consciousness, you are not separate from your unconscious, right? You are not separate from the source of light, but rather, let's see if I can draw this here, right? Rather, you are the source. And when you think about any light source, right? Think about the sun. Does the sun have a shadow? It doesn't, right? Does the source of light, any source of light does it have a shadow? It does not. So when you bring together the elements, these aspects that were once separated by the ego together as one, meaning yourself, your consciousness, your subconscious mind, your conscious mind, and you recognize that you are the source of life, that you are the source of all things, then essentially you rid yourself of the shadow. Okay. Then you recognize that there are no aspects of you that needs healing or needs to really go deep within as far as the dark aspects of you, because you recognize and you truly see the truth that there is no darkness here. There is only light, right? The darkness is an illusion. That doesn't make it, not real per se, or that shadow work isn't valid. But what I'm saying is when you recognize that you are the source of all things that creates the shadow in the first place, when you become, instead of focusing on the shadow, you focus on the source of that shadow, right? Where it all comes from, the light source itself, then you recognize that you are whole and complete. And then you don't really have to do all the shadow work. So as it pertains to money, when you think about yourself being separate from your money, being separate from your financial success or prosperity, instead of saying, oh, I need to go get this money, or I don't have this money, or you start having the mindset of chasing the money, you are identifying with this idea of separation. Okay. And then you are essentially creating a shadow. Okay. You are creating this idea that you are supposed to chase this thing. It is light chasing your shadow. Okay. You can never get it. You will never be able to touch it, feel it, experience it. You will only see it, and it is a projection of your mind's eye. Why? Because you're not connected with the reality that you are the source of money. You are money. Okay. When you realize that you are money and you bring this understanding as one together, then it gets rid of this idea, okay, of desiring money, chasing money, needing money, right? Stressed out because you don't have enough money, worrying about money. You let go of that false, that limiting, that illusion, okay, that you are separate from the money. So this is really about recognizing you are the source of that which you desire. So if it be money, recognize that you are the source of it. You are it. If it be health, recognize you are the source of it. Stop looking down at a projection that isn't based on a truth. It is based on an illusion of truth. Look up where truth exists, right? Look within where truth is. So when you recognize you are the source, okay, you are the light, there is no shadow to be worked out, then guess what? The money, the health, the love of your life, all those things emanate from you, okay? That's where abundance happens. So when you see that you are the center, you are the source, you are the creator, you are where it all comes from, then there is no need for you to feel the chase. There is no need for you to feel like that it is something that is unobtainable, right? So I really wanted to get into this idea for you so you can help you to recognize that though, yes, shadow work is, like I said before, and demonstrated your achievements, your understanding of completion and being whole can be obtained by focusing on the shadow. It can be. But it's better to focus on the positive than the negative. The shadow is a negative projection, okay? And the shadow in itself isn't real. So why focus, why go through the back door when you could simply go through the front? And focusing on consciousness rather than the unconscious is what's going to free you a lot quicker, a lot more effectively, efficiently, and it would just get you there, right? Without going through the mess of the shadow. Because you're going to go through all the stuff of trying to understand the shadow just to understand that the shadow isn't real in the first place. You see what I mean? So it all leads you to the same destination. And this is me not trying to shun or knock the shadow. I have a book on shadow work. But what I want to say is that you don't have to go that route. You know, we actually do live from a place of trying to figure out how to do things as quickly as possible. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're up to doing something. And what I want to say is, you know, if shadow work is intriguing to you and it is of interest to you, great, go for it. But what I'm saying is, instead of focusing on the shadow work, focus on consciousness work. Focus on getting yourself to an understanding of the fact that you are the source, you are the light. And when it comes to your money, you know, focusing on the shadow of not having enough money, feeling like money is elusive and that you can't get a good grasp on it, that you can't understand it, that money is stressful, that money creates anxiety or pain or suffering, that money is evil, right? Instead of focusing on that and trying to heal that approach or go through that approach, don't even worry about that. Because if you're focusing on the light and becoming one with the light, the shadow becomes non-existent. The shadow cannot project itself out. It cannot express itself out into your physical reality because it's not a part of your spiritual, your internal reality. Okay? So that's all I really want to share with you. This is about understanding you are the source of all the things that you desire. You do not have to focus on going backwards, right? In order to go forwards. And a lot of times shadow work represents that for a lot of people. It represents, it's like running a marathon backwards. It's doable. You'll still get to the finish line, but why do it that way when you can run forward, right? It's like saying, you know what, I want to go to this address, which is across the street, but I'm going to go around the entire globe to get there. You can get there eventually, but why not just go across the street? You see, that was a little extreme, but still, it was a fun thought and a silly thought to go with. So this is the visuals that I want you to have, right? In your mind. Bringing the light, identifying yourself as the light source, seeing that you are the source of all of this and of all that you desire instead of something that is separate from you. Okay? Recognize it is one with you. And when you understand that, when you harmonize with that, when you live from that existence, then everything that you desire comes to you, right? Because it is coming from you. So in other words, you get to experience it in the physical because it's in the spiritual. It is yours. All right. Now, if you want to get some more understanding and education on this, I invite you to go to futureselffrequency.com, which will allow you to really break down things like this, kind of conceptualize how to see yourself differently rather than seeing yourself separately from other things, but seeing yourself as one with all things. And when you learn that and recognize that even time, right, isn't something that is separated by, a day, by a week, right, by a year, but something that is here. So whatever you desire and wish to create in your life, you do so by recognizing that you are beyond space and time. And so when you recognize you are beyond space and time, the version of yourself that you desire to experience and be is right there at your grasp, right? It's just a matter of you reaching for it, and you reach for it by simply aligning with it. Okay. So you can go to futureselffrequency.com. So give me your email address and you can get a series of free gifts throughout the course of 7 days that's going to help you to align and understand this concept of the future self frequency and essentially how to align with the version of you that has it all. So go to futureselffrequency.com and get those free gifts. I'm excited for you to actually make these connections. And so that way you can actually live the life that you're meant to live instead of living this life that really doesn't feel like you. Okay. Thank you so much. Peace and abundance always.